The galaxy was bleeding, not with the roar of bolter fire or the cold scream of dying stars, but with silence, a silence born of absence, of things once glorious now lost. Once the heavens above Baal had sung with the choir of Sanguinius's sons, a symphony of might and divine purpose. Now even the echoes of that song had faded, carried into the void on wings no longer golden, but blackened by centuries of war and the rot of ancient sins. 1,000 shattered worlds marked their passage, a diaspora of sorrow that stretched from the scourged stars to the ruins of Kalth. Statues stood where brothers had once stood, motionless and hollow. Cathedrals without song, chapels without prayers, and in the darkness, beneath the surface of that blood-scorched moon, a chamber slept, but it was not empty. He stirred. It was not a man who woke, nor a god. It was something between the two, a relic of both triumph and tragedy. Dante, Lord of the Blood Angels, Chapter Master, Angel of the Imperium. He had not always borne that name with such weight. Once it had lifted him, made him feel as if he were one of Sanguinius's chosen, born to carry forward the legacy of their Primarch. Now it crushed him, like the bones of long-dead seraphs beneath his golden armor. The stasis field disengaged with a muted chime, releasing the ancient warrior into a world that had passed him by. Dust floated on golden beams of filtered light, and even the machines around him, ancient things that hummed with reverence and mourning, seemed slower, dimmer. He was alone, as always, not truly, never truly, for within him the voices stirred, cursed by blood, damned by lineage. It was the gift and the curse of Sanguinius, to burn with such fire, and yet be destined to fall. Chapter Master, a voice whispered through vox static, you asked to be awakened when the outer systems fell. I remember, Dante replied, his voice brittle with age and burden. He did not ask which systems had fallen. He knew, he could feel it, as surely as a man feels the phantom pain of a severed limb. The frontier was gone, the watch fortresses extinguished. A new tide was rising, and not even Guilliman's crusade could stem it. He walked the ancient corridor alone, each step echoing like a death knell. The portraits of chapter masters past watched in silence, their eyes dull, their faces cracked by time and neglect. None had lasted as long as he. None had borne the burden so completely. What did it mean, he wondered, to live beyond one's time? Outside, the once red skies of Baal Secundus were dim beneath the veil of an endless storm. Ash rained from the heavens, remnants of orbital wreckage and forgotten wars. The great rift bled light into the stars, a wound in reality that never truly closed. To look upon it too long was to feel madness stir, and yet they endured. It was not faith that sustained them, nor honor. Those were illusions now, currency used to buy time in a galaxy that had run out of it. What kept Dante upright was something colder, duty, guilt, a promise made at the feet of a dying angel. He paused before the shrine of the Primarch. Sanguinius gazed down upon him, wings unfurled, face serene even in the moment of death, a moment frozen in eternity, repeated in every chapel, every war-torn dream. His sword pointed downward in peace. His feet rested upon a serpent's crushed head. A lie. There was no peace. The serpent always returned. Dante dropped to one knee. His armor groaned like an old man in pain. His fingers curled into fists, trembling not with rage, but restraint. Father, he whispered, I have failed you. The chamber said nothing. The universe did not care. He remained there for some time, unmoving. Perhaps it was minutes, perhaps hours. Time had grown unreliable in recent centuries. warped by warp storms, bent by pain. When he rose, something within him had shifted. It was subtle. No blaring revelation, no shining light, but a quiet resolve, darker than hope. The kind of clarity born not from faith, but despair. The blood angels would stand. They would answer the call once more. But not for glory, not for vengeance. They would fight because it was all they had left, because surrender was a luxury the damned could not afford. In the command chamber, his inner circle waited, survivors, veterans, relics, and one by one they turned to greet their master with bowed heads and unspeaking eyes. They saw the hollowness in him, and they knew. No one asked about the visions. No one dared speak of the red thirst, and none spoke the name of Mephiston. Dante's gaze turned to the star map before him. Lines of war, pinpricks of dying systems, cries for aid from chapters long silent. At the center, the eye of terror, the source, the wound, the grave. He reached forward, activating the projection. One world glowed bright and crimson, a place where it would begin. "Summon the fleet," he said. "Where are we going, my lord?" asked Corbulo, voice heavy with unspoken dread. Dante's reply was barely more than a whisper. To end what began 10,000 years ago. The silence that followed was not of fear, but understanding. They knew what it meant. There would be no return. The blood angels would walk into the blackness of history once more, not as saviors, but as revenants. In the cold void beyond the stars, a forgotten signal awakened. A name, a call, sanguineous. The fleet departed beneath a bleeding sky, like a funeral procession across the void. The blood angels' vessels slipped from Baal's orbit, their hulls weathered by millennia of war. Some were ancient, dating back to the days before the heresy. Others were new, forged in the fires of the Indomitus Crusade. All bore the same symbol, wings outstretched, a blood drop at the center, now faded, scoured by time, as if the galaxy itself was trying to forget. Within the bridge of the red tier, Dante sat in silence. He did not speak as the stars bent around them, nor as the cursed tides of the warp opened to swallow them whole. The flickering golden lights of the Geller field pulsed gently around him, warding off the malevolence that scraped hungrily at the hull. He had made this journey thousands of times, but not like this. Not with so few brothers, not with such certainty of the end. Corbulo stood at his side, his white robes dulled by battle wear. The chief apothecary's face bore the calm of ritual, but Dante could see the wear in his eyes, the weight of 100,000 memories, and one terrible truth. The blood was thinning. The floor was deepening. "We're dying," Corbulo said softly, voice barely audible over the hum of the ship. Dante did not answer. He didn't need to. "The Primaris," Corbulo continued, "they stave off the thirst, but they do not cure it." "No," Dante said, "because it was never a sickness. It was a curse." Corbulo turned to him. "And curses do not lift. They pass. From one generation to the next. From Sanguinius to his sons. From brother to brother. The red thirst, the black rage. Shadows that stalk the blood angels through history like silent executioners. Gilliman's gifts had given them new blood, new bodies, but not new souls." Dante looked out the viewport at the warp beyond. Colours shifted in impossible geometries. Voices whispered through the metal. "We are going to a world of ghosts," he said, "not to be healed, but to remember." Corbulo did not ask which world. He already knew. In the lower decks of the red tier, among the dim and sacred vaults, Brother Sergeant Rayford knelt before the ossified remains of a former captain. his own forebear, long dead. His fingers traced the names carved into the plinth. So many now, entire companies swallowed by the war for the Imperium Nihilus, a list that no longer ended. Beside him, Brother Aphael stood watch, his bolt gun locked in ritual stance, a young warrior by the chapter's ancient standards, but his eyes already bore the strain of battle, eyes that had seen too much and understood too little. "You believe the legends?" Aphael asked, voice low. "That we will find something beneath the dust?" Ryfan did not answer immediately. He stared at the bones. "Hope is a luxury, brother," he said at last. "What we seek is not salvation. It is reckoning." Aphael hesitated. "And if there is only death, then we'll greet it with open arms. Better that than be consumed from within." They stood in silence, the chamber heavy with incense and old data scrolls. Statues of Sanguinius flanked the walls, his expression equal parts serenity and sorrow. Around his feet, cherubic skull servitors hovered, reciting litanies from the Book of Blood. The past clung to the blood angels like smoke. Every corridor, every shrine, was a mirror reflecting a glory that no longer lived. The future was a grey place, and they walked toward it willingly. In the librarius tower, deep in meditation, Mephiston convulsed. The warp tore through his mind with screaming force. His red eyes opened, and for a moment they saw not the walls of the ship, but a river of blood flowing across stars, and a figure at its heart. Not Sanguinius, something older, hungrier. He rose slowly, letting the hum of psychic wards realign around him. The voices had returned. He heard them clearer now. No longer just the rage of brothers lost to the Black Rage, but something beneath even that, something reaching from the edges of time, a thirst that was not theirs alone. "The floor is not a wound, it is a doorway." "Impossible," he whispered. But in his heart, he knew it was not. He walked through the tower's long halls of memory, crystals containing the minds of the fallen, records etched in thought stone, walls pulsing with bound demons and forbidden knowledge. Each step felt like a descent, not through the ship, but into something deeper, something within. He paused at the gate to the red vault. The Primarch's blood shimmered within, contained in stasis field sanctity. A single drop, held aloft on a pillar of gold. Around it, protective wards burned bright with warning sigils, Xenos runes, Imperial glyphs, and the sealed language of Old Baal. And beneath the floor, the casket, the one they never spoke of. "Are you still dreaming?" Mephiston whispered. The glass did not answer. When Dante returned to the central strategium, the command staff had assembled. Corbulo, Ryfan, Aphael, Mephiston. Even the Primaris officers, Gaius, Kalen, and Captain Luciel, stood at attention, uncertain but resolute. The holomap displayed the target world, a dead place, one not spoken of in 10,000 years, Narthamus. Once, it had been a site of pilgrimage, one of the first planets where Sanguinius walked after the Great Crusade, a place where the blood angels had buried their dead in starlight. Now it was lost, cut off by warp storms for centuries. But the rift had opened. A path had cleared. Dante did not explain why he had chosen it. The others did not question. "Prepare for descent," he said. "But why now?" asked Kalen. "Why this world?" Dante's gaze was like iron. "Because it calls." As they left the chamber, Corbulo lingered. He looked once more at the flickering image of Narthamas. He remembered the old legends, the buried crypts, the vault sealed by Sanguinius himself, whispers of a chamber not meant to be found. And deep in his soul, something stirred. Not fear, not yet, but the cold breath of prophecy. Far beyond them, in the silence of that dead world, something shifted beneath the dust. A lock turned, a seal cracked, and in the dark, something opened its eyes. The descent to Nathamas was slow, deliberate, as though the ships themselves feared what lay beneath the clouds. The planet revealed itself, reluctantly, a sullen world veiled in violet storms and rust-hued atmosphere. Lightning crawled through the skies like veins of fire, illuminating skeletal mountain ranges and blackened plateaus. Ruins littered the surface, angular structures half buried beneath eons of dust and ash, monuments to a forgotten age, too regular, too vast, not human, not entirely. On the bridge of the Red Tear, Dante stood as the world grew large in the viewport. It was once sacred, Corbulo said beside him, his voice distant, as if recalling a dream. Dante didn't reply. His thoughts were elsewhere, further down, beneath the planet's surface, beneath stone and time. He could feel it again, that strange pull in the marrow of his bones, not psychic, not warp-born, something older, something that remembered him. Mephiston approached, crimson robes trailing behind him like blood. I feel it too, he said. Dante nodded once. What is it? I don't know. A pause. But it is not calling to you alone. They made landfall in silence. Thunderhawk gunships pierced the roiling clouds, descending through gales of electrostatic interference and biting ash. The landing zone was a wide basin surrounded by broken pillars, monoliths with markings eroded beyond recognition. The wind howled across cracked stone, carrying with it the scent of ozone and old death. The blood angels deployed with solemn efficiency. No war cries, no litanies, just practice movements, the discipline of warriors who had buried too many brothers to believe in pageantry. At the center of the basin lay a ziggurat, half collapsed, its obsidian walls etched with sigils that pulsed faintly as the angels approached. A structure untouched by time's decay. It was not built, it was grown. Dante led the approach, his armor a monument of gold tarnished by centuries of grief. Mephiston walked at his side, staff crackling with restrained force. Corbulo followed close behind, scanning the dust for signs of ancient rites. The others formed a perimeter, Raphan, Aphael, and the younger Primaris, watching, waiting. There's a rhythm here, Mephiston muttered. What do you mean? Raphan asked. Listen. They did. At first there was nothing. Then, faintly, a pulse, distant, subsonic, like the echo of a heart long dead. They breached the ziggurat's gate with reverence. Inside, the darkness pressed like a weight, thick and absolute. Helm lamps flickered against vast inner walls that rose into shadow. Carvings lined the hall, spirals, wings, drops of blood, and a face they all knew. Sanguineous, but distorted. Twisted not by time, but by purpose. His wings were skeletal, his mouth fanged, his eyes closed. Dante stopped. His breath caught. This should not be here. Yet it is, Mephiston said grimly. Corbulo reached out to touch the relief. As his fingers brushed the stone, a low moan rippled through the structure, like breath exhaled from stone lungs. Lights ignited above, ghostly flame in sconces older than human memory. The chamber awoke, and with it the past. They moved deeper into a sanctum beneath the sanctum. Here the architecture changed, smoother, stranger, less human. The walls bled subtle light, pulsing in time with the distant heartbeat. The murals here were different, less about divinity, more about descent. Angels falling, wings burning, faces torn by rage. At the centre was a dais, and upon it a sarcophagus, not ornate, not revered, sealed in chains of blackened adamantium, etched in sigils not of the ecclesiarchy, but of something older. Necron, perhaps, or worse. Raifin drew near, then hesitated. There's something inside. No, Mephiston corrected. There is something beneath. The psychic pressure built around them like pressure behind glass. The red thirst stirred in every blood angel present, subtle, creeping, like vines rising beneath skin. Corbulo dropped to one knee, pain etched across his face. I can hear them, all of them, every death. Mephiston gripped his temples, his vision blurred. The sarcophagus was a wound in the world, not warp touch, but something parallel, something intimate. Then a voice, software familiar, not external, but inside Dante's thoughts. My son. Dante staggered. The others turned, alarmed, but said nothing. His face had gone pale beneath the gold of his helm. Sanguinius, he whispered. No, Mephiston said sharply. Not him. But it was too late. The chamber responded. The chains began to move, not shake, not rattle, but slither, as if alive. The walls cracked open in veins of red light. The heartbeat quickened. Raifin raised his bolter. What is this place? Dante didn't answer. He stepped forward, and the sarcophagus opened. There was no body, only a light, red and golden and wrong. It poured out in silence like a memory given form. A shape took form in the mist, winged, tall, radiant. The illusion of the Primarch, but twisted. It looked at Dante. You carry his blood, but not his soul. What are you? Dante asked, barely able to speak. The apparition tilted its head. I am what remains, what he buried here, to protect you. Corbulo gasped. A part of him? No, Mephiston said, voice breaking. A part of what he became. In the final moments. The chamber quaked. The image of Sanguinius cracked, revealing something darker beneath. Not angelic, not demonic. Something broken. The shadow of all that had died with him. Not his body, not his spirit, but his rage. The red thirst, bound in flesh and stone, sealed by the last act of a dying god. And now, free. The vision imploded. The chamber burst with psychic backlash, throwing the angels to the ground. Sirens wailed across the red tier above. Outside, the weather turned violent. Warp energy burst through the clouds in waves. And Dante lay on the floor, eyes wide as blood trickled from his mouth. The floor had changed, and the war within their blood had just begun. It did not end with the chamber's collapse. The echoes followed them, back through the winding corridors of the ziggurat, up into the ash-choked atmosphere of Narthemus, and even into the armoured halls of the Red Tier. No voice cried out, no enemy attacked, but something had shifted. It was not seen, nor heard, but felt, like a cold breath across a soul already fraying. The fleet rose into orbit, but no one spoke. Even in silence, the blood angels understood. Something had been unsealed, and it had followed them. Dante stood alone in his private sanctum, helmet removed, face etched with exhaustion beyond mortal years. The shadows in the chamber were long, drawn into corners like memories reluctant to be seen. The golden laurels on his armour were dulled, blackened at the edges by the psychic fallout of the chamber. His reflection in the polished iron of his warplate looked unfamiliar, older, darker, as if something inside him had turned away from the light. He had seen the face of Sanguinius again, but not the one he remembered, not the noble countenance from cathedral murals or battlefield visions. This face had wept, not for humanity, but for what it had almost become, a god. or a monster. And now, Dante understood, the flaw was not a random curse, nor a genetic failing. It was legacy, inheritance, the final scream of a dying angel echoing across eternity. You carry his blood, but not his soul. That voice still echoed in his mind. His hand trembled as he removed his gauntlet. He stared at his fingers, still stained red from the dust of Nathamus. They shook, not from fear, from hunger. Elsewhere, deep within the Librarius, Mephiston stood over the black scrolls. They were forbidden texts, each etched with psychic script that burned to look upon, accounts left by those few brothers who had walked the edge of the black rage and returned. Most were insane. A few were prophetic. All had been buried deep beneath layers of denial and doctrine. Now Mephiston read them all. The runes crawled across his vision, shifting, resisting comprehension. But patterns emerged, words repeated, a soul unmade. The rage is not ours. It remembers Baal. He left something behind. Mephiston's eyes flared red as he reached the last scroll. It was not written in High Gothic, not in Baalite dialect. It was older, a dialect he had only seen once before, carved into the vault beneath Nathamus. He realized then, Sanguinius had sealed something away. Not a relic, not a monster, a memory, a splinter of himself too dangerous to carry forward. A piece he could not take into death. His fury, his grief, his despair, all bound in that tomb, passed on not through teaching or ritual, but through blood. And the flaw was that splinter, grown like a shard in every son since. They had not inherited their father's virtues, only the part he could not bear to carry into death. Corbulo walked the apothecarian in silence, stopping at each stasis pod. Within them the fallen slumbered, those who had succumbed to the black rage, trapped in final visions of the Horus heresy, locked in perpetual battle against shadows long dead. He studied their expressions. Agony, rage, glory, loss. He remembered every name, every brother. And as he watched them, something new bloomed in his mind, an idea, unspoken, terrible. What if they are not hallucinating? What if those trapped in the rage were not deluded, but connected? What if, through their fractured minds, they were remembering? If so, then the flaw was not just genetic, it was temporal, a loop, a curse of memory shared across generations, reaching back to the siege of terror, repeating, always ending in the same scream, the death of Sanguinius. He thought of Raphan, of Aphael, of the young Primaris who did not yet hear the whispers. Not yet, but soon. In the lower decks, Raphan stood before a mirror. His hands trembled. He had seen it too. The light, the image of the sarcophagus, the voice that spoke through stone. He hadn't told the others, not even Aphael. He feared what it meant, that the flaw was not in the weak. It was in all of them. The closer they drew to their Primarch's legacy, the nearer they came to madness. He unsheathed his combat blade. His reflection flickered. In the mirror, for a heartbeat, he did not see himself. He saw Sanguinius, bleeding, screaming, and behind him, a second shadow, winged, mouth open wide in silent hunger. Raphan dropped the blade, breath ragged. He was not ready. None of them were. In the Strategium, Dante gathered his command staff. No ceremony, no ritual. They stood in silence around the holomap, its glow bathing their war-scarred faces in cold light. The projection of Nathamus still hovered at the center, slowly turning. The flaw has changed, Dante said. His voice was steady, but distant. Mephiston stepped forward. It is growing, not in frequency, but incoherence. What does that mean? Luciel asked. It means it's becoming aware. There was silence. No longer just a psychic echo, Mephiston continued. It's a mind, or at least the shadow of one, a residue left from our Gene Father's death, from his final moment. Corbulo spoke quietly. His fury, unleashed not on Horus, but turned inward, bound, sealed, and passed to us. Dante looked at them all. Old warriors, loyal sons, damned heroes. What we saw beneath Nathamas was not a prophecy, he said. It was a memory, and it belongs to all of us. Luciel frowned. So what now? We wait for it to consume us. Let it twist our line further until we become no more than berserkers in gold. No, Dante said. We go deeper. He turned to Mephiston. Find the next world, the next memory, before it finds us. Mephiston nodded, though something inside him recoiled. The deeper they went into their legacy, the closer they came to something that did not want to be found. Beyond the veil of the warp, something watched. It did not see with eyes. It did not think in words. It remembered. Pain, wings, fire, and in the blood of the sons of Baal. It stirred once more. The red tear drifted in the void between storms, a lone ember in the bleeding dark. The Geller field held, but the warp pressed harder now, less like a storm and more like a breath on glass. Something was watching, waiting, pacing just beyond the veil. In the strategium, a new world turned slowly in the glow of the hololith. Cervantes, a dead shrine world buried in silence, severed from the Imperium since the great rift tore open the sky. No astropathic signal had escaped its surface in over a century. No recon fleets returned. It was marked for purification and forgotten. Until now. The signal came from beneath the catacombs, Mephiston said. It wasn't sent. It bled into the warp. A memory, Dante murmured. Number A summons, Mephiston replied. The Blood Angels descended with only a strike force. No fanfare, no prayers. The rituals felt hollow now. The surface of Cervantes was cold and grey, its great temples cracked and silent, overgrown with rust lichen and thorn grass. Vast statues of saints lay broken in fields of bone. Wind carried dust like funeral ash. But beneath was the truth. They found it beneath a cathedral to the Emperor. The statue of the god Emperor still stood, face weathered away, one hand outstretched in mercy, the other raised in judgment. The vault door lay shattered at its feet, blasted open from within. Who desecrated this place? Rafen muttered. No one, Mephiston said. It opened itself. They stepped into the dark. The catacombs were older than the shrine world itself, older than the Imperium. Carved into the living stone, they spiraled downward in impossible geometry, curving walls, vanishing corners. The walls were etched with blood, old and dry, and deeper still with something stranger. Feathers, falling, suns, dying, and always that face, sanguineous, not as a hero, as a warning. A shape began to form in Dante's mind, not a memory, a pattern. They reached the inner vault after hours of descent. Here the air was still, not stale, still, like breath held in a crypt. A single sarcophagus lay at the center, flanked by broken censer poles and shattered reliquaries. No name, no sigil, but it called to them. Corbulo moved forward, eyes locked on the tomb. His hand reached out before he realized what he was doing. And then, a voice. Do not mourn the dead. Mourn what remains. The vault screamed. Visions erupted. The blood angels staggered, some falling, others roaring in pain as the black rage surged like a firestorm. But this was not like before, not blind fury, not ancient hallucination. They saw him, sanguineous, standing over the dying form of Horus, his hands bathed in fire and blood. But he did not strike. He did not scream. He wept, a quiet grief, bottomless and old. Around him, terror burned. Titans fell. The Emperor cried out in agony, and Sanguinius turned away, not in cowardice, in guilt. "This is not how it was supposed to be," he whispered. The vision shattered. Dante fell to his knees. He couldn't breathe, not from the memory, but from the truth beneath it. Sanguinius did not die a martyr, he gasped. Mephiston's face was pale. He died knowing he had already failed. The vault shifted, stone split open, and within the tomb, no body, no armor, no relic, only a name etched into the black marble. Remnant. The letters bled. Outside, the warp screamed. The Geller fields of the red tear flickered. Instruments failed. Vox channels burst into static and whispers. Somewhere in the warp, something howled. Not a creature, but a memory waking. They had pulled too deep. They had stirred the soul of a dead angel. In the chamber above, Aphael found Rafen kneeling in the dust, eyes hollow. "I saw him," Rafen said, voice shaking. "He looked at me, not through me, at me, like he knew." "Knew what?" "That I would fail." Aphael gripped his brother's shoulder. "You're not weak." "No," Rafen replied, "but I am his, and that may be worse." Later, Dante stood alone in the shattered chapel at the heart of the cathedral. He stared at the broken image of Sanguinius above the altar, now split down the middle. One half wept, the other screamed. He understood now. The floor was not a corruption. It was not an accident. It was a choice, a burden left behind, the part of Sanguinius that could not die, that would not be judged. "You left it to us," Dante whispered, "because you could not carry it yourself." He closed his eyes. He did not feel betrayal. He felt love, and with it, pain so vast it filled the stars. They departed Cervante in silence. The floor burned brighter. The memories grew louder. The sons of Sanguinius were no longer fighting to survive. They were fighting to understand who they really were. And beyond the rift, something old waited, not to kill them, but to join them. The blood angels did not speak of what they had seen on Cervantes. Even as the red tear slipped back into the warp, even as the ship's holy wards flickered and failed in places, even as entire sections of the crew fell into silence and prayer, the core of the chapter remained mute. No sermons, no war chants, just a quiet understanding, heavy as lead. Their father had not died clean, and what he left behind was not just a legacy, it was a haunting. Dante stood in the reclusium staring into the dark. The chamber was lit by a single flame, set into an iron bowl before a statue of Sanguinius, but even the fire seemed unsure, its light stuttering, as if uncertain it should shine upon what was now true. The chaplains did not interrupt him. They watched from the shadows, silent sentinels in black. Dante no longer saw the angel they had sculpted. He saw the other Sanguinius, the one who had stood before Horus and made a choice not born of righteousness, but sorrow. The flaw, the thirst, the rage. They were not shadows cast by heroism. They were what Sanguinius could not bear to take with him into death. He had shed them like a second soul, and his sons had carried it ever since. He turned away from the flame. "Gather them," he said, "all of them. Every brother who dreams, every primaries who trembles, Every soul who remembers more than his life should allow. One of the chaplains stepped forward. For what purpose, Lord Commander? Dante's voice was quiet. To prepare. In the Librarius, Mephiston's mind burned. He had not slept in days. Sleep was now an invitation. Each time he closed his eyes, he returned to that place, a temple of bleeding stone, and the sound of wings in the dark. At first, he had thought them memories, but they were too ordered, too real, not dreams, inheritance. He tore through the archives of Baal's forgotten histories. He read the accounts of rage-lost brothers, comparing their screams. He charted the words they repeated. He waits. He bleeds. He walks the stars. One phrase stood above all the rest, not spoken aloud, but etched deep into their psychic patterns like scars into flesh. He is not gone. Mephiston felt his hands tremble. He now believed what he once denied. Sanguinius had not vanished at death. He had split. Raphan and Aphael sat in the armory, surrounded by weapons too old to trust and relics too sacred to touch. Neither spoke for some time. Finally, Aphael broke the silence. Do you feel it? Yes, Raphan said. Not like hunger, not like thirst, something else, like I'm remembering someone else's life. I dreamed I was at Terra, Aphael whispered, but it wasn't the vision we trained for. I was standing over Horus, and I wasn't me. Raphan looked at him. I think we all carry fragments, he said, pieces of a death that never fully ended. You mean, our father broke, and we are the shards. On the command deck, Corbulo approached Dante. I've begun testing the gene seed, he said. There are changes, subtle but constant. Even in the primary stock, it's not just the floor anymore. Dante nodded. It's becoming something new. Corbulo hesitated, or something old, returning to its original shape. That night, the visions came to the entire ship. Not dreams, not hallucinations, shared memory. Brothers across decks collapsed in agony, crying out names from the heresy, calling for the Emperor, screaming in terror at the moment of Sanguinius's fall. Some awoke with blood on their hands, others with wings etched in flame across their skin. The Red Tear itself groaned. In the warp, they passed too close to something vast, an ancient presence swimming just beyond thought. Not demonic, not Xenos, just familiar. It brushed against the Geller field like a hand against glass. Mephiston stood on the observation deck as the presence passed. He did not look away. For a moment, just a moment, he saw it. A figure, wreathed in gold, eyes full of grief. Not a god, not a ghost, just a father. When the presence was gone, Dante gathered his inner circle. No ceremony, no banners, no blood wine or chant, just truth. It's no longer just in us, he said. It's around us. The floor has grown. It has become an echo, a resonance that we carry, and something has heard it. What does it want? Asked Raphan. Dante looked to Mephiston. The librarian answered, voice heavy as stone, to be whole. Silence. Then Corbulo stepped forward. If we continue, we risk becoming something else entirely. We already are, Dante said. Luciel scowled. Then what are we? Still Astartes? Still human? Dante's answer was slow. We are what remains when an angel dies. We are the second soul. Later, alone in his sanctum, Dante activated a private Vox signal, encoded, ancient, one known only to a few surviving chapter masters across the stars. He spoke into the silence. To the sons of Sanguinius, this is Commander Dante. The floor has changed. The visions are no longer metaphor. Sanguinius did not die clean. We carry what he could not bury. He paused. I will go further, into the heart of the floor, into the red wake. I will find what calls. And if I do not return, remember this. He leaned closer to the vox, voice a whisper. We were not cursed. We were chosen to finish what he could not. In the void beyond the fleet, something stirred. Not demon, not divine, just sorrow, given form. It began to move toward them, and in its wake, old stars began to flicker. The red tear emerged from the warp into a silence so absolute it felt wrong. No static, no interference, no stars, only a stillness that stretched across light years, as if the universe itself was holding its breath. They had arrived at Erelim's halo, an uncharted system long purged from Imperial records. Mephiston had found it hidden in the corrupted pages of a black scroll, a coordinate etched in psychic backlash, encoded by one who had succumbed to the Black Rage centuries ago. A scream turned into a map. There was no sun here, no planets, not truly. Only a graveyard of shattered moons and hollow asteroids frozen in concentric orbit around a pulsing anomaly at the center. It wasn't warp. It wasn't real space. It was both. A rift, a scar, and it sang. Within the stratageum, the gathered blood angels stood in silence as the anomaly rotated slowly in the hololith. Red pulses radiated from it like a heartbeat. Rayfin broke the stillness. It's him, isn't it? Mephiston didn't respond. His eyes were locked on the display. Dante turned away from the map, voice low. Not him, not truly. Something left behind. A resonance of his last thought, trapped in the moment between death and eternity. Corbulo stepped forward. A psychic splinter? No, Mephiston finally answered. A memory, born so loud, so powerful. It survived its own death. Dante nodded. This is the core of the floor. They descended toward the anomaly in a modified Thunderhawk, silent, stripped of insignia, hulls scorched black. The closer they came, the stranger the world became. Time bled at the edges of perception. Clocks stuttered. Vox signals echoed before they were sent. Shadows moved where there was no light. Through the cockpit viewport they saw it, a structure floating at the anomaly's edge, not a station, not a temple, just stone. Shattered pillars arranged in a circle, impossibly suspended in space. At its center, a single dais hovered. Upon it, a silhouette, unmoving. A man, or something like one. Golden wings carved of broken light, a sword of starlight embedded in the stone before him. He did not move. He only watched. The Thunderhawk landed on nothing. The stone beneath their boots had no mass, no temperature, and yet it held them. The blood angels advanced in ritual formation. No words, no chant, no rage, just reverence and terror. The closer they came, the more the air thickened, not with pressure, but with memory. Each brother felt it, their own past rising to the surface. Old wounds, forgotten oaths, the sound of their first screams, the weight of the first time they tasted blood, and beneath it all, another memory. The siege. Dante felt the phantom pain in his chest, wings he had never possessed breaking. The image of Horus not killing Sanguinius, but consuming him with grief. This place was not merely a monument. It was a wound in time, bleeding ever since. At the dais they halted. The figure remained still, unmoving. Then its eyes opened. No light, no flame, just loss. When it spoke, it was not with voice. It was a pressure in the skull, a shiver down the soul. You should not have come. Dante stepped forward. We had no choice. You were not meant to see this. You were meant to carry it, silently, until the end. You left it inside us, Mephiston said bitterly. Your rage, your failure, you let us worship the lie. Because you needed it. No, Corbulo said, stepping forward, hand on his chest. We needed you, not this hollow echo. The being did not respond, or perhaps it could not, because it wasn't him, not Sanguinius. It was the last scream of his soul, preserved by the warp like a fossil in amber, preserved and fed by every sun who raged, who thirsted, who remembered, a fragment, a broken shard of divinity, too shattered to fade, too sacred to bury. Dante walked to the dais. His steps echoed like thunder, though there was no sound. He looked into the being's hollow eyes and whispered, "Do you remember me?" A pause. Then, one word, like a dying breath. Yes. The ritual began without planning, as if guided by instinct or fate. The blood angels formed a circle around the dais. Each placed their blade in the ground, kneeling. Dante raised his helm. "We do not reject you," he said, "but we cannot carry this lie any longer." He looked to Mephiston. The chief librarian stepped forward, raised both hands and began to pull, not with strength, with will. He reached into the being's form, not flesh, but memory, and drew it out. The pain was indescribable. Half the circle collapsed. Raphan screamed. Aphael bled from his eyes. Corbulo fell to one knee, clutching his chest as phantom wings broke anew. And then it emerged, a spiral of red-gold flame screaming soundlessly, a tornado of sorrow and rage, lifted from the echo form of Sanguinius like breath from a corpse. It spun above them. "Do not do this," it whispered. But they had already chosen. Mephiston reached into his own chest and drew blood, pure, bright, ancestral. He cast it into the flame. One by one, they all followed. A communion, not of faith, of grief. The flame screamed, not in anger, but release. And then, silence. The being on the dais slumped. Its wings cracked, faded, and turned to dust. And the wound in the galaxy closed. Later, aboard the Red Tear, the brothers awoke. The black rage was silent. The red thirst dulled. Not gone, not cured, but quiet, like a storm had finally passed. In the apothecarian, Corbulo ran the tests again. Gene seed, stable. Mutation, frozen. Psychic resonance, flatline. Mephiston stood at the viewport, eyes dark with wonder. "We gave it what it needed," he said. "It only wanted to be mourned." Dante looked down at Baal's faded star on the holomap. "Then we will remember," he said, "not just the angel who flew." His hand closed into a fist, but the one who fell. The silence did not last. In the void that followed the release, the galaxy seemed to pause. For a moment, a heartbeat stretched across stars. The blood angels were free. The floor quieted. The red thirst dimmed. The black rage, once a curse that chained them to a dying vision, now whispered only in memory. But into that silence, something else began to speak. Not a voice, not a scream, a pulse. It began on the edges of the Red Tear. Instruments failed. Auspex screens blinked erratically. The warp drives pulsed with residual static, as if haunted by something unseen. The Geller field, though intact, flickered at its seams. Corbulo noticed it first, studying the gene seed of the brothers who had stood at Erelim's halo. There were changes, not mutations, not corruption, adaptations. The floor had stopped, but the blood had not gone still. It moved differently now, with intent. A will behind the cells, as if something inside had awakened, as if the echo they had released had not truly dispersed. In the Librarius, Mephiston traced the psychic tremors left in their wake. He could see the ripple through the warp, the disturbance they had caused. A psychic detonation, not of pain, but of grief. Pure ancient grief released into a realm of madness, and something had heard it. It was not chaos. It was older, colder, quieter. A memory that did not belong to them. The first message came from a Death Company chaplain stationed aboard the Bloodcaller, a secondary strike cruiser guarding the outskirts of Baal. He had taken his life, but not from despair. He had carved a message into the walls of his cell, his blood used as ink. He is no longer alone. It calls from below the stars. It remembers the first angels. Dante stood on the command deck of the Red Tear, his hands clasped behind his back, eyes locked on the shifting threads of the warp displayed before him. "I thought we had buried it," Luciel said quietly beside him. Dante shook his head. "We buried one ghost, but there may be others." He turned to the gathered command staff. "Our flaw was not singular. It was part of a greater wound. And if that wound echoes across the warp, then others will answer." We silenced the cry of Sanguinius's final grief. A pause, but something older just opened its eyes. Mephiston brought the delta forward. Coordinates, signs, fragments of psychic transmissions intercepted on ancient, unused frequencies. Ones not spoken since the Great Crusade. Each message different, but sharing a common symbol. A winged eye split by a sword. None of them had ever seen it, until Corbulo unearthed it in the hidden reliquaries of Baal, buried in the vaults that only the high sanguinary priest could access. "It's not one of ours," he said. "It predates the Imperium. It predates even the Emperor's rise." Rolfan narrowed his eyes. "Then who does it belong to?" Corbulo looked at Dante. "To the First Legion of Angels." They knew then that the flaw they carried was not just Sanguinius's. It was older, much older. A seed buried in the stars themselves, long before Baal, long before Terra's unification. Sanguinius had not created the flaw. He had merely inherited it, and in his death passed it on. A fragment of something vaster, a design lost to time. And now that the echo was gone, the source had begun to seek them out. A new world came into focus, Caladris, a ghost world in segmentum obscurus. Its sun had died during the Horus heresy. The Imperium had abandoned it to radiation storms and silence. Now, a signal. No human could have sent it. The waveform was organic, rhythmic, genetic. "It's not a call for aid," Mephiston said. "It's a summons." Dante made the decision without hesitation. "We answer." Rolfan frowned. "We don't even know what we're answering to." "No," Dante agreed, "but it knows us." The descent to Caladris was worse than any warp storm. The world was dead, not just lifeless, rejected by life itself. Its surface was glassed by ancient fire, yet carved with impossible geometric scars, spiraling endlessly from a crater at the planet's heart. Nothing grew, nothing aged. Time here moved in fits and starts. Auspex read the terrain as both centuries old and freshly made. The blood angels landed in the crater. At its center, a vault, black, seamless, not Necron, not Imperial, carved with the same winged eye, split by the same sword. It opened as they approached. No power, no key, just recognition. Inside was not a tomb. It was a womb. Rows of sealed chambers, empty sarcophagi, not of stone but of bone. Winged shapes, humanoid, fossilized in stasis. Some had no faces, others had too many. All bore the same fractured sigil over their chests. Corbulo approached one. This one has no gene code, just psychic weight. It's not a crypt, Mephiston whispered. It's a seed vault. For what? Aphael asked. Dante answered without turning. For us. In the final chamber, they found a body, seated on a throne of shattered iron, wings folded, face eroded, but its armor, it bore no Aquila, only the iron sword. In its hands, a blade, burnt to slag. Beside it, etched into the wall in unknown script, a single phrase translated by psychic reflex into words they all understood. We fell before gods were named. We rose before they learned to lie. Dante stared for a long time, then spoke. We thought our flaw was the end. He looked around at the ancient womb, at the relics that had waited for them across 10,000 years. But it was just the beginning. Above Caladris, something vast began to stir in the warp. It was not a demon. It was not divine. It was the first flaw. And now its children had come home. Caladris did not feel like death. It felt like waiting. The world held its breath as the blood angels moved through the black halls of the vault. Above, storms twisted silently in a starless sky. The ancient sarcophagi hummed faintly now, vibrating with a frequency that resonated through their armor, their teeth, their blood. Each step forward was a step deeper into a forgotten lineage. They were not trespassers here. They were descendants. Dante stood alone in the final chamber. The figure on the throne had not moved. It never would. But the presence had not faded. It pressed gently against the edge of his mind, like an old memory trying to return. There was no malevolence in it, only gravity, like the weight of buried truth rising at last. He looked at the sword resting across the ancient corpse's knees, once mighty, now cracked, scorched, and fused into its grip. It had been beautiful once. Now it was a ruin, just like its bearer, just like them. Behind him, Mephiston entered quietly, his expression unreadable. He had not slept since the anomaly at Erelim's halo. The voices were quieter now, but not gone. Whatever this being was, he said, it died alone. Dante turned. Not alone. Silenced. This vault was not a tomb. It was a secret. Buried to rot. Buried to be forgotten. Mephiston nodded. And yet it calls to us now, through our blood, through the floor. Dante looked back to the throne. Because it never left. It only waited for the right kind of ears. Elsewhere in the vault, Rayfin moved along the corridor of fossils. He passed one after another, each sarcophagus different, each shape winged, some monstrously so. Not angels, not quite. There was something older in them, more primal. They were not beautiful, they were terrible. And he understood now what Sanguinius had felt at the edge of his death. The fear he could never voice, the grief he could never cleanse. They were not the first angels. They were echoes. And the truth, terrifying in its simplicity, was this. Their line was never meant to be human. Aboard the Red Tier, Corbulo ran his tests again. The results were impossible. The gene seed of every brother who had entered the vault was changing, but not degrading. It was becoming refined. Old markers reawakening, broken strands reknitting. Even the primary stock, once considered incorruptible, now shifted. But the shift was orderly, purposeful, as if it had been planned from the beginning. They are stabilizing, Corbulo whispered, as if the flaw had never existed. He looked again at the sample under his magnifier. The double helix shimmered faintly with bioluminescence. It was no longer human DNA. On Caladris, in a smaller chamber of etched obsidian, Aphael found what appeared to be a shrine. Not to the Emperor, not to the warp, to blood itself. A fountain long dried, a basin filled with dust the colour of wine. The walls bore writing, far older than Low Gothic, yet somehow felt legible. He reached out to touch one of the inscriptions. His mind went still. A memory not his own filled him. He saw a figure in golden armour, wings torn and blackened, kneeling in a field of glass beneath a bleeding sky. Around him, others fell, great winged forms burning in silence. And he wept. "We tried to be gods," the figure whispered, "but all we left behind were ghosts." That night, the blood angels gathered on the surface of Caladris beneath the shattered sky. A storm raged overhead, but the air remained deathly still. Dante stood at the centre. His armour bore no ornament, no laurels, just the bare plate, scarred, red and old. He raised his voice, not in command, but in confession. Sanguinius did not create us. He inherited us. A murmur, no denial. He gave us a name, a purpose, but he could not give us peace. That was never his to grant. He carried a flaw not of his making, and so did we. He gestured to the vault behind him. "This place is our genesis, not terror, not Baal. Here, before even the stars had names." He looked to his brothers. "I do not know what we are." A pause. "But I know we are changing, and we must choose what rises from this change. Do we remain the sons of a broken lie, or do we become something older, something true?" Silence followed. Then Raphan stepped forward, and he knelt, not to Dante, to the blood in his veins, to the truth in his bones. One by one, the rest followed. Back aboard the Red Tear, Mephiston stood in the Librarius, eyes alight with forbidden light. He opened the final scroll. It was not imperial. It was not written in any tongue known. But he understood it, not with his mind, with his blood. And it spoke of the first ones, of a legion of winged warriors forged before the fall of the first civilizations. Children of light and flesh, meant to be weapons and guardians, but who grew too proud, too mighty. So they were cast down, fragmented, their essence hidden, their rage scattered across time, until now. Dante watched the sky. He felt his pulse slowing, his breath deepening, his heart sinking with something deeper than time. A low voice moved through his mind. Not a vision, not a dream, a memory. "You have burned your wings. Now walk. And remember." The floor was gone, but the transformation had begun. And from the edge of known space, in the shadow of forgotten stars, something was watching. Not chaos, not the Emperor, something older. Something that once ruled the night sky with fire and silence. And now, its children had begun to wake. Caladris fell behind them like a dream dissolving at dawn. But the dream had changed them. The Red Tear drifted through the black gulfs of Segmentum Obscurus, not with the bearing of a warship, but as a vessel between eras. A living relic no longer entirely of the Imperium it once bled for. The blood angels had passed through something beyond understanding, and the galaxy, in turn, had taken notice. They were no longer simply sons of Sanguinius. They were the echo of something ancient, and something ancient had begun to echo back. The first sign came in the silence between warp translations. Mephiston felt it before the machines did, a psychic pressure, massive and subtle, rolling across the Imperium like the ripple of a massive shape moving just beneath the veil. He traced it for hours, attempting to pinpoint a source, but it came from everywhere, from the void itself. We woke it, he whispered to himself, and it remembers. In the inner sanctum, Corbulo confirmed his deepest fear. The blood angels were stabilizing, yes, but not toward humanity. The gene seed now read like a cipher to an older genome. Not Xenos, not warp-tainted, but designed, elegant, coded with intent. The flaw had never been a degradation. It had been a key, and they had unlocked it. At last, the call came. A signal broadcast not by machine, but by presence. A summons, not hostile, not urgent, but final. A place, Nadir's Vale, a world lost even to the Mechanicus, charted once during the Great Crusade, then struck from record. Every fleet that had approached since had been scattered by anomalies or vanished into storms, and now it welcomed them. No demons, no resistance, just a clear psychic invitation. The red tear approached the world. It was cold, no atmosphere, orbiting a blue giant whose light never reached its surface. But what the sensors revealed beneath the crust was staggering. A structure, buried in solid obsidian, miles across, octagonal in shape, layered like a labyrinth. Its power signature was still active, older than the Imperium, older than the warp itself. Dante assembled the strike team himself. No honor guard, no pomp. Only those who had seen what Caladris revealed, those who had heard the silence behind the floor. They descended into the depths of Nadir's Vale. No resistance met them. Only doors, sealed for millennia, opening on approach. Inside, a black cathedral of impossible size. Vaulted columns stretching beyond visibility. The walls pulsed faintly with reddish light, as if lit by the flow of blood through veins. And at the center of it all, a council of statues. 13 in number, each carved in a different form, winged, fanged, scaled, masked, horned, haloed, each unmistakably non-human. And yet, in their shape, there was something familiar. They bore the echoes of Astarte's armor, of power, of command. At their feet, a throne, empty, carved with the same broken winged eye as Caladris. The inscription beneath it read, "The First Host." They had not been the first angels. They had been the last remnants of something that once wore that name. Rayfan stumbled backward, whispering, "This is heresy." "No," Mephiston said, eyes wide. "This is origin." Aphael stepped closer. "You think they created the flaw?" Dante shook his head slowly. "Number, I think. They were the flaw." The room reacted. The statues stirred, not in motion, but in presence. Each began to radiate a distinct psychic resonance, not hostile, evaluating. Memories, layered into stone. Visions struck them, raw and immediate. A war in heaven, long before Terra's sky knew fire. Angelic warriors in gold and obsidian, tearing reality open with words, not weapons. Civil war among beings of flesh and thought, fighting not for power, but for identity. A flaw born of choice, to feel, to remember, to fall in love with mortals. Punishment, banishment, their forms shattered, seeded into time, hidden in blood. One statue burned brightest, the 13th, wingless, bent in sorrow, its name etched at its feet, the one who remained. Dante fell to one knee, not from awe, from recognition. Later, in the ship's sanctum, he addressed his inner circle. "Everything we thought was holy," he said, "was only half the story. We were not made in the Emperor's image. We were built on top of something much older. He paused. I believe Sanguinius knew. In his final moment, I think he remembered. Mephiston looked up from the relic scans. Then what do we do now? Dante was silent for a long time. Then, we decide. That night, Corbulo found Raphan sitting alone in the apothecarian, eyes red, hands shaking. What if we're not angels? Raphan whispered. What if we're monsters, born from lies? Corbulo sat beside him, setting down a small vial of his own blood. It shimmered faintly in the low light. No, he said. We're both. That's what makes us sons of Sanguinius. Raphan looked at the blood. Will we still be Astartes when this is over? A pause. I don't know, Corbulo said. But maybe that's not the point anymore. The floor was gone, but in its place now stood a choice. Do they claim the legacy of the first host, or reject it, and remain bound to a truth half forgotten? A decision loomed, no longer about war or survival, but identity. And far beyond the edges of the Imperium, others had begun to stir, for the first host had not died, only scattered, and some remembered. Some still waited. It began, as all wars do, with whispers. In the shadowed decks of the Red Tier, among the bloodless echoes of the apothecarian and the haunted halls of the librarius, doubt began to bloom, not loud, not declared, but insidious, like rot beneath golden plate. The floor was gone, and with it, something vital had left them, but something else had taken root. The first brother to change was Barakiel, a veteran of 3 centuries, bearer of the chalice during the defense of Baal Prime, and once touched by the Black Rage. Now he no longer slept. His eyes glowed faintly red even in darkness. His armor rejected the Crux Terminatus, shattered it, and in battle drills he moved faster than any Primaris, like liquid war. But when asked about his state, he only said, I remember. That is all. Dante stood before the blooded remnants of his chapter in silence. The echoes of Caladris and Nadir's veil still haunted them. The truth no longer hid in shadows. It lived in their veins. We must decide what we are, he said. No war council, no pomp, just truth. There is a choice before us. Accept what lies in our blood, this legacy of the first host, or sever it, purge it from our gene seed, rebuild ourselves again in the Emperor's image. He let the words hang. No one moved. Mephiston stepped forward. We cannot go back, not truly. The transformation has begun, and I believe it will choose with or without us. Lucille, his voice hard and low, countered. Then we force it. We burn it out. Better to die human than live as something else. There, in that moment, the Legion cracked. It did not break all at once. Some, like Raphan and Ephael, stood in the middle, torn between awe and loyalty, between blood and memory. Others, veterans of the Great Devastation, believed they had earned the right to evolve, to reclaim a destiny stolen by silence and time. They began calling themselves the Remembered, not as a cult, but as a truth. They did not bow to chaos. They did not reject the Emperor, but they refused to forget what they had seen beneath Caladris and in the crypts of Nadir. We were angels before we were soldiers, one whispered, and we will be angels again. Corbulo watched the tests unfold in quiet horror. The Remembered were changing faster now. Their psychic resonance was amplifying, sinking. They moved in perfect coordination without command. In sparring arenas, their strikes blended like choreographed violence. They did not rage. They did not thirst. They remembered, and it terrified him. We created a new breed, he told Dante. No, Dante said slowly. We found them again. The schism came when Lucile tried to execute Barachil. He cited corruption, deviation from the Codex Astartes, psychic divergence, heresy. He gathered 20 brothers and confronted Barachil in the lower sanctum. Barachil did not fight. He simply looked at them. And Lucile's men fell to their knees, not in worship, but in surrender. They wept. They whispered names they had never heard before. Names from a war before the stars. Names buried in their DNA. Lucile raised his bolt pistol. Barachil did not move. Dante arrived before a shot was fired. He did not draw his blade. He only said, "If you fire that weapon, this legion will never be whole again." Lucile lowered the gun, but his silence spoke volumes. The fracture had begun. The Blood Angels now stood on the edge of civil war, not over ideology, over identity. Are they warriors of the Imperium, sons of Sanguinius, echoes of the first host, or some terrible hybrid of all three? Each brother was forced to decide for themselves. Some chose memory, some chose denial, some chose exile. Mephiston returned from the Librarius with a final revelation. There are more vaults, he said. More worlds seeded with the blood of the first host. Some hidden in the eye, others beyond the halo stars. This is not an accident. This is a path. He looked to Dante. We are not the end of a line. We are its awakening. And far from them, in a place no astropath could see, the first host stirred. Not in flesh, not in rage, but in resonance. The blood had begun to sing, and its children, now scattered across the galaxy, heard it. Some in dream, some in battle, and some already awake. The message came from the edge of known space, fragmented, blood-smeared, broken by radiation storms and interference from a dying sun. But the name came through clear. The Chalice Pyre, a successor chapter, gene brethren of the Blood Angels, isolated for centuries in the ash-clouded arc of the Stygian expanse, thought lost during the age of apostasy. They had survived, but they had changed. The message was a warning, not a cry for aid, not a reunion, a declaration. We have seen the blood awakened. We have traced the inheritance of the flaw to its first sin, and we will purge it, root and memory alike. It was signed in the blood code of the chapter master. Astotal, once a high chaplain of Baal, thought slain during the scourging. He had not died. He had found something ancient, and it had spoken. Dante watched the hololith flicker, Asta's cracked voice repeating, echoing like a judgment. He believes what he's doing is holy, Mephiston said quietly. He is a priest, Aphael added, and now, a zealot. Corbulo stepped forward, face grim. He calls himself the Warden of the Flame. He thinks the flaw was a disease, but he's wrong. He thinks we're the disease, Rafen murmured. The Blood Angels gathered their fleet. They did not bring the full chapter. Too many now stood undecided. The civil fracture, once silent, had deepened. The remembered grew stronger each day. Their dreams now echoed in one another's minds. Barachil no longer needed words to command, and Dante, old, weary, iron-bound by the chains of tradition, stood between two futures, the one he had bled for, and the one calling to him in the silence between his heartbeats. They found the Chalice Pyre in orbit of Sindrail, a world scorched black by solar storms, its atmosphere stripped to nothing. The Pyre's ships formed a cathedral in orbit, black, spined, rimmed in crimson flame. Each bore the sigil of a burning goblet wrapped in chains. When the blood angels hailed them, they did not respond. Instead, a single ship detached from the flotilla, a relic vessel, boxy and ancient, its hull etched in runes of flame and ash. It transmitted one word: judgment. Dante led the boarding party himself. He did not bring Mephiston. He did not bring Barachiel. He brought the unmarked, the undecided. Adi, final attempt at unity. Inside the derelict, they found a temple. Stone floors, bones laid in perfect circles, icons of fire and chains, and at the center, Asta Tal, clad in armor black as ruin, his face pale, gaunt, eyes lit with a holy fire that was not warp-touched, but something worse: belief. He knelt before a burning chalice, blood boiling in its bowl. "Brother," Dante said, voice tired. "No," Asta answered. "Heretic." The room trembled as Asta rose. "You embrace the flaw. You sanctify the memory of that which should never have been born. You desecrate the gift Sanguinius gave us when he died for purity." "You do not understand what we've seen," Dante said. Asta's voice grew louder. "I understand too well. I have walked the halls beneath the stars. I have seen the first angels unbound, and I have burned them." He stepped closer. "You would awaken them. You would let them return. I will not let that happen." Dante lowered his helm. "Then you will die blind." The battle was not a war. It was a funeral. Blood met blood. Brother turned on brother in silence. The halls of the ancient ship burned with bolt fire and screams. But this was not the rage of war. This was sorrow incarnate. Dante struck down Asta himself, though it took more than steel. Asta fought like a thing beyond mortal flesh, fueled not by mutation, but conviction. He struck Dante's shoulder clean from its pauldron, shattered his rib cage, but he could not break his will. "I loved you," Dante whispered as he ran his blade through the priest's chest. "And still I do." Astor fell not screaming but weeping. In the aftermath, the surviving Chalice Pyre warriors knelt before the blood angels, not in submission, but in mourning. They had not known, they had not seen, and now they too heard the pulse in their blood, the silent song waking across the galaxy. Corbulo ran the tests himself. The gene seed was changing, even in them. Back aboard the Red Tear, Mephiston traced the patterns. "The song is spreading. It's not just us anymore," Corbulo said. "Every bloodline that shares the red gene, they're all beginning to hear it." Aphael stared out the viewport. "Then it's not a flaw. It's a signal." Dante stood alone in the strategium. Behind him, the echoes of the first host now haunted every corridor, and far, far beyond, across space unmarked by star or emperor, something ancient began to move. A winged figure made of light and ash, eyes closed, but waking. They called it the 13th Vault. Not a name in the records of Baal, not charted by the Mechanicus, not found in the codices of the Librarius. It was a whisper in the warp. A point of silence amidst the storm, unnaturally quiet, as though the galaxy itself had turned its face from it. Coordinates were passed like forbidden scripture between the remembered. Mephiston confirmed the pattern. Each blood angel who had undergone the awakening dreamt the same stars, the same black world, with the 3 broken moons circling it like penitents, a place none of them had ever seen, and yet all of them had been there. The journey took months, through maelstroms, past dead systems, over warp scars that bled madness and time distortion. The red tear came through older and not entirely unchanged. Its Gellerfield wept tears of black oil for days after their arrival. Astropaths bled from the eyes. Choirs sang in sleep, their voices inverted, as though calling backward through memory. And yet, no demons came, no warp entities stirred. As if something greater held the leash of reality here, they had reached the world of the vault, Serix Ecliptis, a planet without sun. Its surface was obsidian dust, shimmering with faint bioluminescence. Its sky was full of fractures, small, spidering tears in the fabric of space, unmoving, watching. And at its heart, the vault, blacker than void, silent, sealed, but listening. Dante walked alone, not as master of the chapter, not as Lord of Baal, but as a soul searching for its source. Behind him came the remembered. Barachiel, now so changed he no longer wore a helm, his face radiant with some quiet grief. Aphael, whose blood no longer boiled but sang. Mephiston, whose eyes burned with unreadable light. And Corbulo, carrying a fragment of the gene seed in a stasis vial, like a sacrament. They crossed the threshold together. No doors barred their path. The vault opened like acceptance. Inside, the world bent. They walked through memory. Not theirs, but the memory of the bloodline itself. The walls shimmered with echoes. Angels not of terror. Warriors made of sorrow and light, bent under the weight of their own power. A civilization that fought with empathy sharpened into blades. Songs that sundered stars, words that killed. And betrayal, so much betrayal. A host that fell not from sin, but from love unguarded, love for mortals. At the center of the vault sat a throne of living stone, and in it a figure, not sleeping, not dead, waiting. It rose without movement, simply existing in a new position, tall beyond logic, skin of silvered ash, no face but a radiance behind a visor of obsidian that moved like smoke. Wings, folded in countless layers, humming with a sound that had no source. This was not a man. This was not a god. This was what came before both, the last of the first host, the one Sanguinius had forgotten, the one the Emperor had buried. No one spoke. Words were unnecessary. The being looked upon them all, Dante, Mephiston, Barachiel, and something deeper than communication passed between them. Judgment. The vault responded to the presence. Its walls flared with pain memories, the shattering of the host, the burning of their names, the rewriting of history, the transformation of angels into monsters, and back again. And then the being finally spoke, not in sound, but in the blood. You carry the flame we left behind. You weep for sins not your own. You have come, not for power, but for understanding. So I ask, what do you choose to become? Dante stepped forward and knelt, not in worship, in acceptance. We are not your weapons, he said. We are not your heirs. We are what remains, the imperfect memory of a lost cause, the sorrow of a flawed father passed into blood. He looked up at the being. But we will not forget again. The being was silent. Then it raised a single hand. Its palm opened. Inside was a blade, not forged, not built, but remembered into being. A sword of sorrow, shaped by memory. And it offered it, not as a gift, not as a command, but as a choice. Barachiel stepped forward first and accepted it. The moment the blade left the being's hand, something changed in the warp. Not a flare, not a storm. A note, perfect, mournful, eternal, was struck across all reality. Across the stars, every successor chapter of the Blood Angels felt it. Some wept, Some screamed, some knelt. The first host's song had returned. The being stepped back. Its work was done. It returned to the throne and folded its wings. Dante turned. He did not smile, but his face bore peace for the first time in centuries. The blood angels walked out of the vault, not redeemed, not damned, but finally whole. The flaw was gone. In its place was something older than purity, older than loyalty, older than the emperor himself, a memory made flesh, an echo made will, and now it had a name again. They returned to imperial space not as sons, but as strangers. No fanfare awaited them, no salutes, no laurels, only the uneasy silence of a galaxy that had not changed while they had become other. The blood angels emerged from the void with ships veiled in psionic resonance, their hulls bleeding spectral light. The red tear no longer bore the aquila. It bore no sigil at all, for their very presence was now a symbol, and the Imperium, bound by law, by fear, by the Emperor's unyielding corpse throne, had begun to murmur, not of reverence, but of heresy. The first order came from the Ordo Hereticus, a transmission sealed in the blood of a confessor of Ophelia VII, in light of reports regarding the genetic corruption and spiritual deviation of the chapter known as the Blood Angels and their successors. The Holy Ordos hereby declare an inquisitorial inquest. All members of said lineage are to stand before the throne and be judged for deviation from the imperial creed. Failure to comply shall be met with annihilation. Dante read the message in silence, then placed it in the fire, and turned to his brothers. We answer not with rebellion, not with submission. He paused. We answer with truth. On Hydrafor, Cardinal Executor Aemon read the same reports with trembling hands. The gene priests of Mars spoke of aberrations in the gene seed, stabilizations impossible by known science. The black rage had disappeared. So had the red thirst. They should have rejoiced. Instead, they feared. What stabilizes without cause, Aemon whispered, is guided by something greater than us. And that, to the Imperium, was unacceptable. In the halls of the ecclesiarchy, the synod began to move. Chaplains of other chapters were summoned. Many wept upon seeing what their brother chaplains among the blood angels had become. Radiant, serene, silent in prayer, as if they spoke not to the emperor, but to something else. A memory of holiness, older than the Lectitio Divinitatus. And for many, that was blasphemy. The first confrontation came on Casterel Novum, a world being overrun by the Tyranids. The blood angels arrived unbidden. They descended not as liberators, not as crusaders, but as harbingers. Clad in red turned black, helms adorned with no iconography save their own blood. They walked into the storm without command, and they did what none had before them. They stopped the hive mind, not with violence, with presence. The remembered stood in the center of the assault and sang, not with voice, but through the resonance of their awakened blood. The swarm paused, the hive mind turned, and it fled. It had felt something older than prey. The news reached Terra within the week. The Tyranids had fled a world. No exterminatus, no fleet, no Primarch returned, just them. And the question could no longer be ignored. What are the blood angels now? Mephiston returned to Baal and found its sands changed. The planet trembled beneath the presence of its own suns. The chapter's catacombs opened by themselves, ancient vaults yielding secrets no tech marine had ever been able to unlock. Symbols bloomed in stone as though the planet had waited for the song's return. Not a planet, a relic, and it too had remembered. But not all bowed. On Sotha, remnants of the Ultramarine successors began to gather in secret. They are no longer Astartes, one said. They are no longer Imperial, said another. And the most zealous among them whispered, if we do not end them, they will replace us. So a message was sent to the High Lords, a warning, a plan, and a list of every Blood Angel successor chapter still unawakened. Dante felt it. Across the stars, the song had gained a discordant note. The old ways rallied to strike. They would not allow the first host to rise again. But Dante did not prepare for war. He sent no call to arms. He gathered his captains in the vaulted sanctum of Baal, now pulsing with the same memory stone as Caladris and the Chiwe's 13th vault, and said simply, they will come. And Barakiel asked, do we fight them? Dante looked out at the stars and spoke not as a chapter master, but as the last echo of a forgotten angel. Number, we will show them what we are, and let them decide if they can still raise their blades. The war had not yet begun, but the Imperium had seen, and the blood that once damned the sons of Sanguinius now asked the galaxy to remember, not with fear, but with reverence. There is a silence that comes before endings, not peace, but a hush, like the breath before a sword falls, like the space between the stars when history itself holds still. This was that silence. Across the galaxy, the sons of Sanguinius waited, not in fortresses, not behind void shields, but in open ground, on shrine worlds, in ruined hives, on starships drifting like forgotten hymns through starlight. They wore no war paint. They raised no banners. They did not strike first. They remembered and waited. The Imperium had decided, or so it thought. Atop the hollowed crust of holy terror, beneath the shadow of the Emperor's throne, the High Lords gathered, not to deliberate, but to choose. The Inquisition had called the Blood Angels a mutation. The Ecclesiarchy declared them a heresy of memory. The Mechanicus called them impossible. But the truth was simpler. The Blood Angels had become something new, and the Imperium could not control what it could not name. So they gave the order. Extinction. It began with the Veil Crusade. 5 chapters, led by the Purifiers of Vrax, descended upon a Blood Angel successor stronghold, the Crimson Seraphs. They expected resistance. They found open gates, and inside the Seraphs knelt, unarmed, unmoving. They offered no heresy, no defiance, only a choice. See what we have become, their chapter master said, before you decide to end us. And the Purifiers saw. The Seraphs did not speak of the first host. They did not argue doctrine. They bled in ritual. And when their blood touched the ground, it sang, a song of memory, of grief, of sorrow turned to purpose. One librarian among the Purifiers collapsed in weeping. He saw his ancestors. He saw Sanguinius die again. But this time, not for the Emperor. For them, the assault order was never executed. Across Segmentum Solar, similar encounters repeated. At first, violence, but then doubt, and then something deeper. A reverence not willed, not indoctrinated, felt. The flaw had been a song, and now it resonated in all of them. Even in the most unyielding chapters, cracks began to show. In the Black Templars, a chaplain renounced his chains and walked into exile, saying only, I have heard the angels sing. On Mars, a fabricator lord shut down an entire forge upon discovering gene code that should not have existed, and knelt before it. On Terra, in a locked chamber near the Golden Throne, an astropath screamed for hours, speaking in Sanguinius's voice. Dante stood atop the highest spire of Baal. He did not pray. He did not hope. He had done all he could. He had chosen to be remembered, not worshipped, to stand in truth, not legacy. And now, the choice was no longer his. And then the message came. Stand down, from the Lord Commander of the Imperium, Robert Guilliman. No judgment, no war. The angels may rise or fall by their own hand. He had seen it, not in words, not in reports, but in a vision, not from the Emperor, but from Sanguinius. For 3 nights, Guilliman had not slept, not from illness, from visitation. He saw his brother, not as he had been in the Great Crusade, but as a being radiant with something no Primarch had ever truly understood: compassion that cost. Sanguinius had not died for the Emperor. He had chosen to die for mankind, for the hope of what might come after, and the Blood Angels were that hope, not perfect, not divine, just honest. Sorrow made flesh, memory given wings. The war never came. The Imperium, this time, chose silence over fire. Or as the Blood Angels remain, not quite loyal, not quite fallen, a crimson thread in the Imperium's ever-fraying tapestry. They walk among humanity, not as gods, not as monsters, but as reminders. That sorrow does not make you weak. That grief can shape you. And that memory, when held without shame, can be a weapon as sharp as any blade. Baal is different now. Its sands are silvered in the light of a new dawn. Its towers hum with living memory. The flaw is gone. The thirst is stilled. But the angel remains, not just in them, in all who choose to remember. And somewhere, in the dark between stars, the first host watches, not to rule, not to return, but to see if their children finally learn to forgive themselves